Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Back to the City. I'm very excited to be joined by all four members of Straya in the duplex and, of course, at the Minnehaha Recording Company. We're going to be taking a journey through the new record Sobereyed. We're going to start at the end with the song K, which was performed at the Minnehaha Recording Company only 2 days ago by Straya. So without any further ado, let's go to the Minnehaha Recording Company and then we'll take our journey through the new record. Back. That was K by Straya, who are described by your new label, Chain Letter Collective, as the nexus between art metal, instrumental jazzcore, and good old-fashioned Midwestern emotion. How would you describe Straya?
Yeah, we've just been like naming like 4 genres for sake of like trying to have a baseline for people who've never heard of us, like, or listened to anything. Like, we go with like progressive, post-metal, ambient.
Art rock.
Yeah, art rock works.
Broad rock. No.
Not that one. So we were talking about ambient music in our previous interview, which was just me and Sanjeev and Cody. Now that we have Mark, we can
Clarify.
Oh God, I haven't thought about these songs in so long.
What's the story behind Custom Tower? Just to get a few facts straight.
I think it was Alex Simpson
Yeah.
who engineered Sobereyed
Yeah, that's
and
right.
also recorded that EP and engineered it.
Mm-hmm.
He, I think, was making a joke about the precision of my keyboard playing.
Yeah, if you wanted to be like a human played it, then have Sanjeev play it. But if you wanted to sound like freakishly accurate, then like a computer did it, then have Mark play it.
Right. So Custom Tower is like a custom-built computer desktop. It's just a metaphor
That Mark is a
for my
machine.
body, I guess. Yeah.
It's like a fully human person with emotions and, you know, flaws, and I'm also very charming, and
Yeah.
and Mark is a machine.
So you're responsible for the good old-fashioned Midwest emotion.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, that's right.
Right.
I hope that was true. The wanting it to sound like a human, wanting it to sound like a machine, and anecdote turns out to be true. How does that apply to Sobereyed then? I feel like there are some moments where everything sounds extremely pristine in terms of, say, rhythm. It sounds like a machine made it. It sounds like the Custom Tower made it.
Yeah.
But then there are other moments where there's kind of frailty, this imperfection. It seems to me to be, purposefully there.
Yeah.
Is that the case? Are there specific moments where you're kind of applying that?
Yeah. I think that's like really to the core of at least some of what we were doing on the record.
Yeah.
For the more like computerized moments, like a laugh, where there's literally Toby recorded live drum sounds but programmed them using MIDI.
Yeah.
So it's literally, a machine playing drums. Things like that, I think that was...
Sounds like it. That is the
Yeah.
moment I was thinking of, actually. Yeah.
Right, I think that was, at least for me, I've been listening to a lot of like industrial music and post-industrial music lately.
Mm.
I feel like that was drawing on that influence more, where there's a lot of experiments with like using tapes and, the technology being like very present.
Sure, yeah. That's...
But then also on like acoustic songs, isn't like the moment where like, like the drums are being artificially manipulated in a sort of like very like, like process heavy kind of way, like simultaneously while like the guitar and the vocals and everything is pretty like straightforward, like playing together. They happen at like different elements where it's like purely focused on one way or another, but then like in other parts it's like those two processes are happening simultaneously.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the acoustic song, the full title of which is Acoustic Song, parentheses, for rock quartet and fixed media, close parentheses.
That was the abridged title.
Is that true? It sounds like it's a joke, but I think it's true. I know something of the genesis of this story acoustic song, which would explain the name. It began as a song on acoustic guitar that Sanjeev wrote. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep. But we can hear this song now, and it doesn't sound like an acoustic song at the beginning. Who's playing what? As the song begins, it's key.
Yeah, it starts out with me playing a pattern on Rhodes
Yeah.
that continues for the first, I don't know how long it is, the whole first section of it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is just me repeating that pattern.
Yeah.
And then it comes in with swells on Sanjeev and Cody playing guitar.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I started playing the guitar.
It's first Sanjeev, and then Cody adds in, and then Toby comes in with cymbal swells.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the beginning, and then it goes to like then I'm actually playing acoustic guitar.
And you playing acoustic guitar was actually, of course, chronologically the first thing that happened. Like, in terms of writing the song.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I wrote.
Did you realize when you were writing this song on acoustic guitar that you were writing a Straya song?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, like that, and like Leech kind of came out of a spot where it was like, I don't know if this is gonna end up with Straya or like, cause I don't really know what the future holds. Like, I was gonna say that if we can't use this stuff, then we're gonna have a problem, because then we have too narrowly defined our music. Like,
Yeah.
I want to be able to use this stuff.
Yeah.
And to make it work, and like this is just that's how it ended up happening.
So having decided that that acoustic song was going to evolve into the acoustic song that exists on the record, for example, were there any parameters that you did set? So Straya could be and do anything, but for the purposes of Sobereyed, did you decide, okay, these are the attributes, these are the components?
Yeah. Well, the architecture we kind of hammered out, It was just like, I was like, I wanted to write like these chords that kind of move from one to the next in like, just like 4 or 5 chords.
Yeah.
And just sort of do it in a way that like, the way I kind of saw it was just like just vocals and the acoustic guitar. But then when I showed it to like Cody and Mark, then they were like, Mark immediately went on this whole like added dimension of just like the escalating keys.
Yeah.
And so, like
So
the
I think-
interlocking keys in guitar.
Sanjeev didn't set any specific parameters
Yeah.
of how we could approach the song.
Yeah.
And I think this was before before Toby had joined, but
Yeah, this is kind of like when it was just the 3 of us for a little bit.
right. Cody and I, we obviously like loved the content of what Sanjeev had composed, but we wanted to kind of bury it. For some reason, we didn't want it to sound like someone just. No, honestly, and we discussed this. We didn't want it to be just someone strumming with an acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
Singing a song.
Definitely.
So we wanted to add a layer over it. I mean, bury is the wrong word. I guess to enhance it. With contrasting material.
Make it even better.
With contrasting material. No, honestly.
No, yeah, I mean, like the way that works is though
Yeah.
that sounds is that like, well, we already said that like the drums are kind of, doing their own thing, where it's like a really process heavy thing. But even the music, the instruments that are being performed live, like the guitar and the keys and the acoustic guitar, are already like kind of proceeding almost as if they're not recognizing each other.
Mark wrote like the Rhodes and the guitar part. Like he notated this out over like Sanjeev's chords, and the way that I remember conceptualizing of it was like, let's do a different song over the top of this song.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's a little bit of like, almost like a swing feel.
There is, yeah.
Like to Sanjeev's part, and then me and Mark are just playing in straight 8th notes. So
For part of it, though.
for part of it,
And,
yeah.
and that's what I wanted to say to you, too. I don't think it's the concept, at least for me, like writing those parts, wasn't that it wouldn't be responding to the chords that you're playing. All the chords that we're playing outline the chords he's playing, and I think the concept that we wanted to go for was a different feel for each chord.
Yeah.
Every time he changes a chord, our rhythmic feel changes.
It does, yeah.
Sometimes it goes to ascending line, sometimes they're kind of snaking among or between the 2 lines.
Yeah.
I don't know,
Well,
so
I
just like
wanted-
kind of like a kaleidoscope of shifting
Yeah.
feels, which plays into Toby's
And also-
different drum feels coming up and down.
Sitting on the continuum of like having like 2 things that are like written like very like intentionally together, like in a very like direct and obvious way, to the point where you wouldn't question it, to the point where, and like on the other end of the spectrum, it's like playing 2 completely different songs at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
There are moments
it's
when
somewhere in there, yeah, just sort of like bouncing back and forth as far as like the discernibility of like how in concert with each other the different aspects are.
Yeah.
And especially with like the drums, where it's like we're switching from like one to the other, where like the style is just going to completely shift on the next chord.
Was that a conscious collective decision between the 3 of you? The idea, the principle that whenever Sanjeev's chords change, then we'll change our rhythmic pattern, or we'll change something.
Yeah.
I think not, at least for me, not consciously. I wasn't like aware of the chords so much as
Yeah.
I was aware of sections and trying
Yeah.
to like drastically change it based on sections.
To
Right.
accentuate.
And you had come in after we had worked out our 3 parts,
Exactly. I came in sort of on top.
Yeah.
And I came to sort of the same realization.
which was great. Yeah.
Yeah. How many of the songs existed in some form before you joined, Toby?
Probably half of them, maybe a little more.
Timid did, Acoustic Song did, Kay did.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Kind
Made
of.
Lighter and
Made
Leech,
Lighter.
too.
Yeah, I guess all of the
Yeah.
big
I was
ones.
gonna say Leech probably changed more.
A lot, yeah.
It
You
did.
were,
All
you were
of the songs, they existed in some
Yeah, in some
way, but it
forms.
was probably like a very like limited.
Yeah.
And
we
Toby-
definitely learned
Toby
to
was
all
a-
together.
right. Toby was a big part of composing a lot of them, but just for some of them, how far we had gone before he added his part was just.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we didn't have any of the drums for K at all.
Yeah, that was completely untouched. Whereas like Timid was almost done, I think.
Yeah.
Right? It was like more or less finished.
And you're not just, as we will witness, you're not just playing drums. You play guitar, for example.
Yeah, I play guitar just on Made Lighter.
On Made Lighter, yeah. So Made Lighter then.
And Tongue Is Nothing, technically.
Oh, what's this?
Oh
what's this
yeah,
thing?
Or like the 28 guitar choir, you know.
Yeah.
Oh,
We'll get there. We'll get there.
So when we return to the Minnehaha Recording Company, you will be playing guitar at the beginning of the song, which will actually be two songs. Like in the middle of the record, it will be Made Lighter flowing into Leech. And Leech, the drums are very prominent right at the beginning. It is just the drums at the beginning.
Yeah.
So and so in the middle of the performance. How did what we will witness you doing, Toby, on this next song, on these next two songs, how did that evolve?
So Made Later, you guys had pretty much written already on synths, right? That was like done, and so I was just sort of trying to figure out what I could add or if I needed to add anything.
Yeah. Did you think I can add something, but it's not on percussion?
Yeah, I think it became pretty clear right away that like there's no drums on this, or there shouldn't be drums on this. And so I was just playing around with like keyboards and guitars and figuring out if there was anything else. And I don't do a lot on that song, but there are some like simple layers that I found that I liked, so added those.
Yeah.
And then for Leech, it was more, you even had like a drum idea in mind.
Yeah, I had like that exact beat in mind.
Based on the bass part. So I took that and then just sort of like worked with that idea and sort of fleshed it out some more.
I feel like in Made Lighter as well, there is the same kind of alternation between rhythms, or there's very distinct sections that it kind of oscillates between. So there's like a cyclical melody, and then there's like this pulsing. Is there a significance to the way in which the songs are structured? There are basically at least two kind of coherent atmospheres that we're jolting between, which strikes me as interesting because...
You mean between like the cyclical keys and like Mark's like...
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely, yeah. I feel like this is where we are, no, this is where we are, and it's not random, and it's not playing with us, no, we're here, no, we're here, no, we're here. It's coherent and structured, but we're being jolted from one to the other. Is that
well, I mean, it kind of also plays on like the track before, Hollow Ring, where it's like the guitar from acoustic song like phasing with that really like well-defined
the synth.
The digital sort of
metronomic.
Right. The acoustic song ends with a single melodic guitar part by the end, and then that kind of continues through into Hollow Ring, like presumably like rings through. Why is Hollow Ring called Hollow Ring? Is there
I guess like for that track and Made Lighter, I was thinking really like structurally and like spatially. Yeah. So I was thinking about like, I have like this sandbox and I'm just like placing what the chords ended up being and what it ended up like playing became secondary to how I was thinking of arranging it. You know what I mean? Okay. So like the Hollow Ring is a sort of like a structural kind of thing. And because it's like phasing, I was thinking sort of like a thing that's just like moving around in a circle. Yep. And like, if you ran it like infinite amount of times that song, like how many times would you have to, like how long would you have to play it to like hit every single point of the circle?
Oh, interesting.
It's kind of a weird thing with like initial conditions and like systems of like chaos where like if you have it.
Can you what is an initial condition? What are initial conditions?
Sorry, just to put it in it, like you might be getting too complex with it. Just to like lay it out, he's referencing phasing, right? It's just that I guess the initial condition would be the acoustic guitar is being looped, and the synth is playing this precisely metronomic rhythm, just these like quarter notes or whatever you want to call them, and they're at slightly different tempos. So the rhythms are together and then they shift apart and then they come together again.
Yeah.
It strikes me as conceptually significant, what you were saying about looping and about the cyclical. In our previous conversation we were focusing on the name and the the cover to the first LP, Healthy Steps. So this is in the image between Cody and Toby at the moment is your friend walking up the steps to your old home. So we were talking about the idea of ascent, and we were talking about the narrative component, and so the image and the name would suggest onward and upward movement. But to tell that, and we were talking about narratives as well, and we tell convenient, helpful narrative stories about each other that often stop us from revealing the truth as much as they might reveal something. So we were talking about the limitations, the way in which the music worked against the idea of just ascending up healthy steps.
Yeah.
And I think that this focus on the cyclical in the new record works in a really interesting way, not against, but at a counter direction to the idea of ascent. Is that something? Do you agree? Is there a conceptual significance to the cyclical throughout Sobereyed?
I mean,
I've never thought of that.
I've actually thought quite a bit about this. Just haven't told. Yeah.
Now it's your time.
So I don't know. I think that that's a very that rubric and framework of sort of like framing your life or your trajectory in life. Or historical trajectories or whatever. I think the framework of like healthy steps where it's like A to B, and it's like an ascent.
Yeah.
It's kind of like predicated on some fundamental assumptions of just like onward and upward, forward mostly just the progress being framed as this inevitable thing that happens as the future unfolds, the thermodynamic arrow of time pointing in that way to a better world.
Yeah.
And I think that it's I don't want to say it's naive. I just think that it's a fundamentally limited framework of looking at it. Whereas in the cyclical, I found kind of more structural stability in that framing, because in cycles of regeneration and symbioses.
Yep.
And the sort of two-way street kind of nature, as opposed to just this big arrow that's pointing in one direction.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. Yeah.
And I would also say more aesthetically, I guess.
Yeah.
For that, building off what he's saying with kind of a linear narrative beginning to end, I think we all are more in the direction of, with art, I guess art in general, wanting things that don't hold your hand and tell you how to interpret it, or how to engage with a film or a book or an album or something, and kind of verse chorus structures that we're on Healthy Steps, or kind of this very straightforward narrative of growth. I think really makes someone listen to that album in a particular way.
Yeah.
Obviously there's room for interpretation because music, I don't know.
There always is.
But this kind of opens it up more, and I think also a cyclical nature thinking throughout the whole album kind of starts and ends with these more kind of post-metal-y tracks, I guess. I think the first and the last track, Timid and K, are the most similar to each other than any other tracks on the album. And I think that just kind of invites you to maybe to listen to the album more than once, right? It kind of cycles on itself, and it doesn't necessarily feel finished. You're back where you began, maybe?
I think the idea of cycles, sort of playing off what you were talking about earlier with these different layers that are always coexisting, I think those two ideas are really important going together for me. This idea of going through something multiple times, but since several things are layered and are cycling, every occurrence is slightly different because of what is paired with at that moment.
Something I recognize that led to that question, as well as noticing the cyclical, were the lyrics in Acoustic Song. Knowing the genesis of the Healthy Steps idea and the image of walking up one's own steps, it struck me as interesting that Acoustic Song begins with "Fall Down the Stairwell."
Yeah.
And perhaps not coincidental. See my mistake again. Recent shame with a different name, refine the question, oh, how I fall. So this idea of falling and it kind of drawing attention to the idea of falling, like this descent.
Yeah.
What's going on there?
With Healthy Steps, in that vision, it really came from a place where, like, I think many of us were living less healthy than we are now, and it came from a place of hope, really. And it was a statement of hope. It wasn't like this natural like law written that was like things will always get better, you know. So I think it was sort of just like a counterpoint to, like, you know, there's a balance of like ascension and descension.
Mm-hmm.
To like view that in a way that like destigmatized like failure, and to like it's okay to fail, it's okay to like descend, and even like it like purely viewing it in terms of ascension and descension is like limiting.
Sure.
Because there's a lot of like historical processes that you look at that are like point A to B, where B is like worse, but it's framed like as a natural process that, like, you know, whether it be like capital accumulation or whatever, that's like a very destructive process. Sorry, I don't want to get really political right now, but that's, I hope that's not political.
It's not.
But sometimes like the arrow of like point A to point B, it leaves you at a dead end anyways. So at that point, like, dissension isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's like, and that's what like refine the question is, like taking a moment, like take stock, like take a pause and like reevaluate.
Break out of a particular.
Yeah, I guess out of like the kind of like rigid structure.
Yeah.
Structural kind of like, you know, framing of the issue, you know.
And I feel like this breaking out of a pattern idea is something that comes up like sonically throughout, like even especially I think right at the very beginning of the record, at the beginning of Timid. I feel like a pattern is established. You know, there's like a guitar riff, but then before too long, like as the other instrumentation comes in, then the riff is kind of there, but it's like pulled in these different directions. It's transformed, it's broken. That's almost the first thing that happens in the record. Why does the record open on that note then?
I mean, I guess like compositionally,
Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to set a ground, like set a blank slate rather than starting from silence right into the more kind of expressive riff.
Well, the lyrics to Timid are kind of like embarking, kind of. Do you think like
From the beginning is.
As far as
Yeah,
like the physical action of like what I imagine like sort of with like, it's still kind of like starting on a fresh page, except like not in those words,
Yeah.
you know, and not just sort of like, this is what we're doing right now. Like I think we did a lot. Like, well, obviously like Mark wrote it, so there's much better language.
No. And I think that's accurate. I just think it's less confident than starting on a fresh page in Healthy Steps, right?
Yeah.
Because I kind of wrote this like literally, like I think it works on different layers, but I literally wrote the lyrics to Timid about me like becoming a little bit more confident, and also literally about starting to play guitar, which I started to do on this album.
Yeah.
Which also kind of cycles back to you were talking about frailty, and maybe we'll get back to that. But
Yeah.
like the mistakes being on
We'll
the
always go
album
back to frailty, Mark.
from me being a novice guitarist, you know.
You're the machine.
Yeah,
You're supposed to-
exactly.
You're
So
not supposed to sound like a human.
right. So it's framed as this change that's maybe progress, but it's just kind of different. Like it's I tried to frame it as it's kind of, you know, moving towards this, like there's like these images of fire, of like the sun and burning.
Yeah.
It's kind of representing the guitar more. It has these connotations through like rock and roll.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's this change to where it's unfettered motion. You know, it's different and more powerful, but it's less controlled. So it's not like it's not progress. It's just a metamorphosis, I guess.
It's really interesting that you say that about the guitar, because shortly after the lyric "Timid Forever," I saw the night come always on me, and then the song no longer sounds timid when the guitar comes in. The fiery guitar comes in.
Exactly.
It's called Timid, but it seems to be exploring both timidity and confidence.
Exactly.
I think there's an oscillation between timidity and confidence. Why does the record begin oscillating between those two specific things, timidity and confidence? Is there a significance to that in terms of sequencing?
I mean,
I think it just felt best starting off the record with that.
yeah.
I think, I mean, it starts nicely. Among other things, it's one of the like more sort of straightforward song type songs.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of things on the record that are a little more like processy or sort of weird or like, you know, I don't know.
It's
Well, yeah,
it's the only song that has a chorus on it.
Yeah, right.
Well,
It doesn't have a chorus, but yeah, it has a repeated section.
Let
The
it bloom as opposed to just like starting into it with something like a laugh. You know what
I think it's
Yeah.
probably like important to know from the start that like, you know, we wrote a bunch of songs and then like, but before we actually finished the album, like finished all the writing, like we just got like sort of a map of like the concept of where everything was gonna go. And we knew how we wanted it to be. Like, I mean, the idea is that like, obviously listen how you want, but like, I mean, we wrote this to like be something that you should listen to from start to finish, like to have like the best experience with it, we think.
Yeah.
And yeah, like Timid was that was the first song that we wrote for the record. And I guess just like Toby said, that it's like the most straightforward song of it. It just
Yeah.
made sense to like, let's start here and then like go
and
from
then
there.
immediately go to.
And then immediately go to 8 minutes of ambience.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say is that like there's some stuff on there where like between like timidity and like, you know, confidence, like where like those two are in like conversation with each other.
Right.
Like there's a
All the time.
balance, you know, and they're always like, you know, negotiating and renegotiating, and you know, there's like Cody just said, like starting out from a place of confidence, but there's a lot of parts on the album where like we had no idea what it was gonna sound like until
Right.
we like did it, and we were like, okay, well, like I hope this sounds good or cool
Yeah.
or listenable,
Right.
you know, like especially with like Tongue is Nothing. We can talk more about that later. Except like it was really just like, I don't know. Okay,
Hope this
whatever. We'll
works.
talk about it later. Yeah, I hope this
Yeah.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think,
Yeah.
I don't know, I definitely wasn't conscious of this then, but like you were saying, the timidity confidence thing like really represents, I think, how we felt about the record in general. You know, like trying to do
Yeah.
something new, trying to like have a very different sound, and sort of like assuming that most people who like the older Straya stuff probably
Or-
won't like it.
or they
Yeah.
just won't necessarily like it.
Yeah, they won't necessarily.
It's not that they won't like
Yeah,
it, it's
yeah.
just not.
It's
gonna-
very different.
It's very different,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah,
right.
so being like really happy with it, but also very like, I wonder if anyone will like this.
Yeah, or if the same people will like it.
Yes.
Well, yeah, because we also like
Yeah.
the first single. How long is it?
It's 11 minutes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, yeah, like we learned a bunch of stuff from Healthy Steps, so now we're gonna put out a single that's 11 minutes long.
It's
You
almost
know,
half as long as Shelly stuff.
And I think that also points towards something that we haven't really talked about directly yet, which is there's a lot of like selfishness behind this.
Sure.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, talking like Cody said, we want people to listen to the whole thing. It's an hour long. That's a big time commitment.
Mhm.
We want people to be focused when they're listening on it, which is a lot to ask of someone, even of like close friends.
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
like.
Sure.
And putting out the long single, I don't know, and totally changing our sound, possibly alienating people who liked us in the past.
Yeah.
It's selfish, and I don't necessarily see that as a hugely negative thing, because I mean, I feel like I'm mostly doing it for myself. This is like how I am a
Yeah.
person, is like doing
Right.
these things.
Yeah.
But it's still so meaningful to have people engage with it.
Right.
Yeah.
As you have, and as our friends have who have listened to it already.
It's not like writing 4 or 5 minute songs on Healthy Steps like it took us anywhere in the music world either. So it's like, I mean, it was really fun, and I'm glad,
And
so
come on,
glad
we played
people liked
Kansas
it.
City.
But yeah, we played to nobody and on
Yeah.
tour. a
And
few
it's also,
times, but-
to write conventional songs isn't selfless. You might,
Sure.
one,
Yeah.
more people might more immediately relate to them, and one might therefore end up playing to a slightly larger crowd in Kansas City. But at the same, but at the same time, there's something kind of selfish about that too. I want to write music so that I play to a larger crowd in Kansas City.
Sure,
Whereas here, you know, following your intuition and thinking, well, this is what I can do to grow as a musician or as a person or explore these new areas. That's less selfish in a way.
I guess, yeah, and also like it's not a very helpful framework because it's sort of setting up maybe like an antagonistic relationship between the listener and the creator, and that there's like a conflict of interest there, which I don't think is true.
Right now.
Right.
Like you know, like I said, like if there's a symbiotic, there's a back and forth. you know. So I think, yeah, I think it's a false dichotomy.
Yeah, how would you define the relation with the listener of Sobereyed in particular, who is being presented with a journey to go on, but it's not a journey as we've discussed from A to B, like a clear progress from A to B. Can you describe the type of relationship that this specific album invites listeners to have?
I think, I don't know, like, I think even in our band we engage with it in different ways, like I think I might be the only one who will, like, pick out tracks to listen to more often, like, just from, like, what we've talked about.
That's not how you're supposed to do it.
Yeah. I know, and that's not how that's the thing, though. Yeah, you did, I didn't read the Sobereyed instructions. Please turn up Limp Bizkit in the background. I don't know, like, I think the idea of, like, long tracks like that kind of invite people to listen to at least big chunks of it, but like, I don't know, I want people to do whatever they want. Like, if you engage with it, I don't care as long as you're doing it.
I think that's the big thing for me. When we talk about, like, the way to listen to it, what we were conceptualizing, I think that's more the way we would listen to it if another band had put this record out.
Sure.
And we've talked about before, like, we put
yeah.
out a record that we think is really cool, that, like, we would be excited about if somebody else put it out. But however people want to engage with it is, you know, it's like, we're very okay with people listening to 3 minutes of one song on repeat.
There's no reason to prefer our perspective.
Sort of like,
exactly.
I think, like, it's like if you built, like, a building with a bunch of rooms in it and placed everything really intentionally, and you were like, okay, let's go explore this, and then, like, some people just decided that they wanted to scale the facade and just hang out on the roof.
That's okay too.
So cool.
Yeah.
You know, like, so, like, thanks for, you know, being part of it at all.
So you heard him, buy the CD, break it, don't listen to it, don't download it.
Buy
Scale
a
the
building.
facade.
Scale the facade.
Scale of facade. Yeah, exactly.
Climb US Bank Stadium.
So I think that sort of tempers the selfishness of it. Is that, like, we were, I suppose, selfish in doing what we wanted to, but there's not a, like, oh, you have to do this when you listen to it.
You know this building, you've lived in it for a long time. Here, you think it invites this kind of treatment, but as the band, you invite people to respond.
The record is like an invitation, like, come into our home and just see, like, where we've been hanging out.
And as we discussed, leaving room for different types of interpretation, not following necessarily a set narrative, like musical narrative that people know so well.
Yeah. I think contrary to the accusations of selfishness that you leveled against yourselves, I think that if we do end up at one destination, or if we're thinking about just where we're left at the very end of the record, there is this sense of intimacy, these two things in conversation, which is what I think is being celebrated in many of the songs. Like, conceptually and sonically, that's what's being celebrated. So I'm looking forward to experiencing all of these emotions, like a little bit of terror, given that there will be some Cody catharsis to that. Confidence, timidity, and human frailty. I'm looking forward to experiencing all of these at Mortimers on the final Thursday of March, which is the 29th. I should know this because I've organised this show. It is the inaugural Back to the City showcase that Straya will be closing. Performing just before then will be Weta, and opening the show will be Tony the Scribe, and then Lucid Vanguard. So I'm excited for that. Thanks for being involved in today's interview, and for coming into the Minnehaha Recording Company, and for playing that show. I look forward to seeing you at Mortimers twice.
Thank you.
You're very welcome indeed.
And big thanks to Chain Letter Collective
Yeah.
for supporting us in this endeavor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chain Letter Collective. Good choice of band. I've been Simon Calder. This is Back to the City. Thank you very much for tuning in. See you at Mortimers on the 29th. Thank you very much, Straya, for coming in.